Today's webinar is a special webinar where we're going to be talking about how to submit compliant Atlas Network grant reports. So I know a lot of you on this call are partners of Atlas Network and have active grants with Atlas Network. So this webinar is going to be very helpful because we know our process can be a little confusing sometimes and there's a lot of questions. But lucky for us, our Institute Relations Manager, Honey Crevallari, is here to answer all of your questions and clear up all of that confusion. So Honey's going to be running us through her presentation. And if you have questions for Honey about her presentation, or maybe about something she didn't cover, go ahead and enter those into the question and answer box that you see on the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to those at the end of the presentation. So without further ado, Honey, over to you.
Thank you, Lindy, and hello, everyone. Thank you for joining me today. And hopefully this presentation will help you answer questions that you have about reporting and provide a little bit more insight on how to submit a quality report to Atlas Network. So let's jump right to it. Our little agenda here has 5 sections I will be going over. First one is where to submit a report, finding and keeping up with report deadlines, writing and submitting the report form, and some helpful tips to keep in mind, which I will discuss at the end. So first and foremost, before submitting a report, you must know where to do so. And if you are a first-time grantee recipient, it can be confusing, but it is more straightforward than you might think. If you are required to submit an Atlas Network grant report, that means for sure that you are approved for a grant. And because you were approved for a grant, you had to submit a grant proposal on our web portal. So the same web portal that you submitted your project proposal is where you'll be submitting your grant reports. And that is at apply.atlasnetwork.org. And once you go to the website and you sign in with your email and password, probably the same one that you used for your proposal, you should see something similar to this. And your grant application should be listed under, well, your applications. Pretty straightforward too. So if you look at the status near the application that you submitted, it should say awarded or approved. If it's neither awarded or approved, either you do not have a report due, or there's something on our end that we still need to change. So if you did get email confirmation that you did get approved for a grant, it should change within a couple of days to awarded. Your proposals will be listed on the application ID. And if you click on the application of your choice, which in this case, I created one for the Global Voice for Open Trade for the purpose of this presentation, it will take you to the same section you submitted your original proposal. However, when you click there, you shouldn't see your application stage anymore. You should see either first progress report title or a final report title. And the title depends on whether we require that you submit 1, 2, or more reports. Usually that depends on how long it takes to complete your report. So we based how many reports it's due on the timeline you provided on your original proposal. You should notice that if your application stage is final report, or even third report, you will see sections below stating second, third, first reports. And it can be a bit confusing because a lot of people think that you need to submit those sections as well. But you do not need to worry about those sections unless they are active. And you can tell they are active by the start button up at the top right here. Do you see? In this example, the final report is due. This is the section you'll be filling out. If you try to click on anything on third report, which is an active section, you won't be able to make any changes. So that's how you orient yourself on which one you should be working on. So going back to our active section, if you click on the start button by the grantee progress report, or if it's a final report, it will say grantee final report. It will take you to our mandatory report form, which you can fill out online. We also have the task section where you can add additional materials, and I will be discussing those later on in this presentation, but just so you keep in mind. I do get a lot of questions about this application deadline up at the top, but this application deadline has nothing to do with your report due date. Really, they are about our grant grant session, our grant deadline. So if you have new application proposals, new project proposals to send to Atlas Network, that's what you should orient yourself by. Your grant deadlines are not stated anywhere in this portal. So we go to the next point on our agenda. Where are my report deadlines then? So it is pretty simple. They are stated in your grant agreement. And you can see here a few examples, an example of a standard grant agreement. To be more specific, you find your report date on section C. And please keep in mind that the date format that we use is month, date, and year. And you are responsible for keeping up with your report dates. Usually, we do send at least one reminder email, but even if we did not, it is still your responsibility to keep those dates, put it on your calendar, and in order for you to be compliant. So, honey, what should I do if my report dates do not correctly reflect the schedule of my project anymore? I know things change, especially during COVID. That happened a lot with our grantees. So it's very simple. If we need to change your report dates, reschedule them, just contact a member of the Institute Relations team at your earliest convenience. So as soon as you know the project will be delayed and you have a new timeline, you have to let us know. And the easiest way to do it is by email. Ideally, you should contact me because I'm the current report manager in the team. But if you, for some reason, don't have my email access at the time and you need to talk to somebody, anyone in the IR team should help you out, should be able to help you out. I would like to discuss why it is important to keep up with dates and submit reports on time, because this is really serious. Our process became a lot more formal, and it's for a few different reasons. So first, your compliance affects your future grant opportunities. We do take into consideration whether a grantee has been consistently late when we review new grant proposals. So in addition, any grant report that is late by over 150 days are automatically disqualified for receiving any further funding. So if you have a report that's over 150 days and you apply for a new grant, you will automatically be taken out of the pool for consideration. Second, your report is used to inform Atlas Network's donors of how the fundings were spent. So the information you provide is of extreme importance to us, and we use those to submit our own reports to the foundation that fund us. And it is really in your best interest to be compliant and be on time and provide as much details moving forward. And finally, your compliance demonstrate your commitment. So if you are consistently late, that reflects poorly on you and your organization, and we don't want that. Moving on to our next topic in the agenda, we're going to talk about my favorite part, which is how to submit a quality report. As I mentioned previously, by clicking the start button next to the grantee final report, that should take you to our report form, which you can fill out online. And I will go over the core questions in the form, but keep in mind that each grant line has a few specific questions that I will not be discussing today. But for those, I do have some general tips at the end that you should keep in mind when filling them out. For the purpose of this webinar, let's say I am sending a report on a proposal that was approved 6 months ago. So I will fill the form based on this project, which is, let's say it's an Atlas Network project that was approved by Atlas Network, funny. And let's say my project was to influence policymakers and educate the population of the US on the benefits of eliminating all trade barriers on food products imported to the country. So that's the main idea of the proposal that was approved. So the first 5 questions are pretty straightforward. First is organization name, which in this case is Atlas Network, country, United States, the name of point of contact. So that is the name of the person either responsible for the project or for this report in particular. So if our report manager goes into the report and we have more information that we need, we will contact the main point of contact that you listed in this report. And then point of contact email. And then finally, the grant number. The grant number can be found in your portal, so right here under reference ID, or if you click on it, it will also be at the top right here. You can also find it on your grant agreement. So let's move on to the next few questions. As I mentioned, this is a fictional report and about eliminating barriers to food imports. So on question 6, that's what I will be writing about. So the question says, please briefly describe the purpose of your grant. This question is also on your original project proposal. So you could just copy and paste what you submitted during the proposal into this box. However, if for whatever reason the previous description does not reflect the project accurately anymore, I recommend following this simple format, which the first one is state the purpose of this project. The second one is state the method you use to achieve this purpose. And finally, state the ultimate goal of this project. Your answer to question 6 should be a quick summary, no more than 2 paragraphs. We have another questions to fill up the bulk of what the project has, the progress of the project. So you can move on to question 6, which is what was the grant amount received by your organization? So that's the dollar amount that you received from Atlas Network. And the next question is your total project budget. You should have answered the total project budget questions on your original proposal, but if for whatever reason that's not the correct amount anymore, please update with the new amount. The next question is, are you on schedule according to the timeline provided in your grant? If yes, then you're good. Just click yes and keep going. If no, remember to include the reason for delay and a new timeline in your answer to the following question. And as well, please email me again, like I mentioned previously, so we can keep up with the dates and reschedule if need to be. So the next section, it's question 10, and usually that's where you're going to put most of your details about the progress of your project. So question 10 says, select the type of outcomes that have occurred as a result of your work funded by this grant, and please provide detailed explanation of any sections made above. So 3 things to keep in mind when answering this specific question. Clearly state what outcomes you are referring to. So if you select policy changes as a outcome, when you write in the box, do a format in which it's clear that's what you're talking about. Usually I put a little title that says public policy changes, and then right below what was the changes that happened in that specific outcome. Second is state all quantitative and qualitative outcomes. We want to know everything about your project, all the outcomes that you achieved, and whether they're qualitative or quantitative. So try to be as detailed as possible. So if you put an event together, we want to know how many attendees you have, what kind of people you invited to, what was your target audience, was there any media mention? So we really want to know all of the quantitative and qualitative outcomes. And 3, include details of what was accomplished and how you accomplished it. You know, if you claim that there was a public policy change, we want to know how you achieved that. It's a pretty amazing thing to do, and we want to know the details of your strategy and who you had to talk to, who you educated, what kind of events you put together. Finally, question 11, did you complete all the outputs that you choose for this project? If yes, that probably means you are completed with a project. If no, that's completely fine. If it's a progress report, do not worry about clicking no, because it's still in between. Your project's not complete at this time. It's completely fine. And even if it's at the end of your final project and you are not able to complete all the outputs, as long as you have a plausible reason to not have completed, sometimes our grantees change strategy for depending on the environment or different unforeseen events that come to happen. And so as long as that explained in a reasonable way, that is completely fine too. So yes, but sometimes on final reports, because of that line of timeline changes and you did not complete your outputs, and it is a final report, we may request a post-grant report. So if you fill out a final report, but your project is not completed, we will request you to submit an additional report later on by the time you finish your report. Now, question 12 is one of the most important ones and one that causes confusion sometimes. So what outcomes did you choose for this project? So the outcomes that you chose are on your original project proposal, and they will be auto-populated into this form. So whatever you see here should have been on my original proposal already. And usually we have my colleague Jack Shannon will help you write outcomes that are measurable. Because when we ask questions whether they were achieved or not, it's a simple yes or no question, and you should keep that in mind. So if my goal was 1,000 conference attendees and I only reached 900, that means I did not achieve my goal. So I would have to click no. Even though it's pretty close to my goal, it's a pretty good result in the end. I just still did not achieve what I was meant to achieve. And that is completely fine. We want our grantees to have ambitious goals, and sometimes those are not going to be achieved, and that's fine, and we can move on and learn from what we did in the past and do something different. So do not be afraid to say no if you actually didn't achieve that specific outcome. And after, in the bottom, you have some space to write about how you achieved it, what exactly did you do to achieve, what was the end results. So as I mentioned, my first outcome, proposed outcome was 1,000 event attendees, and here I'm claiming that I did achieve 1,000. Actually, I went above and beyond, and I had 1,200 attendees. So first thing to keep in mind, provide the exact quantitative measure you achieved. So if I claim that I wanted to do 1,000 attendees, and don't only state yes, I achieved this goal, actually mention how many attendees I had in the end for that example. On the second one, my goal was 50 media mentions, and in this case, I didn't achieve, but I still said we accomplished 40 media mentions. So next thing, be clear whether the outcome was actually achieved. So if you click yes or no, make sure to restate on these boxes exactly whether you did achieve or not. And for the example of the 40 media mentions which I didn't achieve, the 50, we'd say we accomplished 40 media mentions, falling short of 10 to accomplish our proposed outcome. So as clear as possible. And third, add details of how the proposed outcome was achieved. Always make sure that you explain to us what was done. We want to understand your project, we understand what you have done, and it is important to state how those goals were achieved instead of just stating whether it was achieved or not. And finally, add any additional results and details associated to original proposed outputs and outcomes. So sometimes my proposal was, a conference, but there's so much that comes out of it that you may not anticipate. For example, in my hypothetical fictional project, Senator Orrin Hatch came to my event and publicly announced his support to our project. That's something pretty amazing to mention, and we want to know about all of this. So question 13, approximately how many people would you estimate have benefited from your work? In this scenario, let's say we achieved the policy win and all food tariffs and non-tariff barriers were cut out in this scenario. That means that food's going to be cheaper all over the US. So no tariffs, no taxes on food anymore imported into the US. That means that all of US population will benefit from this change. So my estimated number is all of the US population. So it just depends on what your project is. If you had a student project in which you did a conference or a book discussion with 100 students, that's the amount of people you're going to add there. Question 14 is that please provide a description of who has benefited or will benefit from your work and include any specific anecdotes or examples of individuals. So this is your chance to tell a powerful story and appeal to emotions. So if you have any testimonials, any stories that, brings people to like really admire your work, that's your chance to talk about it. Or it can also be just the results of your work in a different point of view. So for example, let's say I did a study after this tariffs were cut out, and I see that on average it saves American households $5,000. So mention that we are not experts and we really want to try to understand the impact of your work. So if you want to take this time on question 14 to explain how this affects the population or whoever people you worked with, please do so. Now, question 15 and 16 be tricky. So the first one is, if applicable, and it's okay if it's not, list out public policy reform when related to the specific project. So mine would have been, the unilateral measure that was implemented, which cuts all barriers for food trade. Number 16, ask all public policies and reforms that your organization achieved in a year, and that can be it can be related to a project of Atlas Network or not a project from Atlas Networks. That's completely fine. We just want to know the impact of our grantees. We want to see what they are doing out there, and I recommend use a list format. So I would say number one, state what it is and specific what it is, the name, and then explain what that means. And if your list is too long because you're just that impressive, feel free to add that list as an Excel format or a Word document into the additional material or backup material section. Just state that all of those wins are attached, and that is completely fine as well. So after those are the bulk core questions for the report. Once you're done, make sure to save and exit. And once you do so, you should see the status as completed right here under grant final report. If you added any attached materials, it should also say completed. But one thing you need to remember is always click submit. So the completed doesn't mean that you will send to us. Only after you click the submit button that we will receive it. So sometimes grantees finish up all of the forms, but they don't submit, and it looks like they didn't submit it on time because we didn't actually receive it. Once you click submit, you won't be able to make changes anymore, and that's when you know that you have submitted the report. Finally, we can discuss additional materials. Usually they are not required usually, but they are highly encouraged, and some of them might be required, which I will talk about it in a little bit. So photos, we always highly encourage. If your particular project included photos such as an event, we use it for marketing purposes. We use it for our donors, and we want to show the world how great your project is. So please include a few. It doesn't have to be a lot, but we do encourage it. Additional materials can be a range of different things depending on your project. For example, your first startup grant, we would love to see, proof of fundraising efforts. We would like to see proof of like new office space that you just rented. It just depends on your project, but not required as I mentioned. But if part of your project, for example, was to write a paper on, like mine, food imports and how that benefited population, please attach your report. We want to read it. We want to understand your project as best as we can. And finally, media mentions. This specific section is only required of Global Voice for Open Trade projects, but we are thinking about adding those to other grant lines. So in this case, there's a specific format that you need to follow, but even if it's not required of your project, we highly encourage for you to attach a list of media mentions and state whether they were positive coverage or negative coverage, just for purpose of understanding the impact of your project. Finally, I have some helpful tips. I am sorry for the bad image. For some reason, it worked earlier today. So when contacting us about a grant report, please remember to always include the grant number, which I talked about earlier. And like I said, you can find them on your grant agreement or on your application portal. We have over 300 active grants at once, and it's really hard for us to remember what each one is which. So when you talk to us, when you send the email, please have that on hand to facilitate the process and make things a lot easier. Second, when in doubt, check out our FAQ page. You might find a lot of answers to your questions there. But if you do not find it, please ask sooner rather than later. Just send us an email. We are here to help you, and we will love to know about your doubts. Maybe we can add more questions and answers to the FAQ page after talking to you. So please let us know. Keep your audience in mind. So when you're writing this report, keep in mind that we are no experts and you know better than we do. So assume that your audience has no idea what the project is about. We're really just trying to learn. So we are a kid and you're trying to explain to us what was the impact. So please be as detailed and talk in as simple terms as possible. And be honest, do not inflate your results. We are here to help you as well, not only through funds, but through improving your strategy and connecting you with the right people to learn new things. And we learn a lot from your challenges and we want to learn about it. So do not be afraid to include failures or mistakes that were done and how you plan on improving on them. Details are important, which I mentioned over and over during this presentation. We want to know not only what you achieve, but what that means to you, to your organization, to the people that you worked with. And finally, if you have any questions, I'd love to answer them.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Honey. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague, Sam, and he's going to be facilitating question and answer. If you do have questions, make sure to enter them into that question and answer box, and we'll get to as many as we can.
Awesome. Thank you, Honey. Our first question is, what if our project changes and therefore our outputs and outcomes change with it?
Okay, so similar to grant dates, grant report dates, outcomes and outputs can also be changed. We know that strategies change. COVID was a huge example of that, when people had to completely rethink their projects. And all you need to do is really just talk to us and tell us what is it that you plan on changing, and we will do the changes manually for you to reflect on your original proposal and on your upcoming grant reports. So all you need to do is email one of us at the Institute Relations team.
Awesome. And the next one is, if we discover that the money allocated for a certain line item is more than we used, is it possible to use that extra money to cover another activity? For instance, another input that is still within our goal but wasn't mentioned in the original application.
Yes, so if you would like to add an output because for whatever reason the grant was more than you expected, or just things were a lot cheaper than you expected, again, all about communication. Let us know what you plan on doing with it, and we should approve it or reject it. It's very unlikely that we reject it, especially if it's related to that one project you're working on. But again, communication with us is the first thing you should do.
Great. And next, how can I make my reports outstanding? What is the most valuable and convenient way to keep Atlas updated on our progress?
All right, so you can always send informal update emails. We love those, especially if it's a big win that you had or something major. Just send us an email about it, and we keep track of those in your records. So, but always, again, make sure to include it on your progress and final reports as well. Even though you might have sent it to us, we want to have a complete form in the end. But email is the simplest way, and just keeping us updated of big changes or big wins that you had.
Excellent. Next is, if our advocacy videos have reached 2 million people, can we claim that 2 million people have benefited from our work?
That is very difficult. It depends on the project. If your project was solemnly this one educational video, I would say that the video views is more important than how many reached, because I know on social media the metrics can be a bit difficult. You can have like different impressions, you can have likes, and you can have views. Even though you like a Facebook post, you might have reached 1,000 people, but doesn't mean that 1,000 people actually was reading your post. So I think for videos specifically, I would look at video views as a way of influencing those people. So yeah, because you brought some kind of knowledge to them.
Awesome. And the next one is, I have some previous grants on my portal. However, I do not, how can I know that my final report submission was correct and that the project is properly closed?
All right. So if you submitted your final report on time, we have a period of a month or 2 months, depending on the bulk of how many we get on that specific period to review it. If we contact you asking for more information, that means your report is not complete. But if it is, if you click on the portal, like I mentioned before, if you click on under application ID, at the top should say completed application. So your status will still be awarded, but if you click on that, you should say complete application at the top. So that's when you know that you have, it's all is good, then you shouldn't worry about it.
Excellent. And right now, that is all the questions that we have, except for one last one, which is, where can I rewatch this video? And I think that that's a great segue into Lindy to close us out, unless any other questions trickle in.
Definitely. Well, I just want to say thank you so much to all of our partners who've joined us, and to Honey for putting on this webinar. This is something that you'll want to go back and rewatch as you're submitting your final reports and as you're submitting your progress reports. So if you didn't happen to see the announcement last week, we have rebranded our former Atlas Leadership Academy to now become the Atlas Network Academy. So if you haven't already, go visit ana.atlasnetwork.org, and you can sign up for a new account with us, or log in if you already have created an account. So this video and Honey's slides will be available on that website in a couple of hours. After this, we'll get it all uploaded. And if you have any other questions, Honey's email is right there, and she's more than happy to answer any of your questions. So I'd like to thank all of you so much, and we'll see you next time for our next webinar.